Hi everybody. Today I am going to try to convert this glass container into a terrarium, and I've got some supplies and a design in mind, so let's see how that turns out. To start with, in the base I've got decorative stones to provide some drainage in the bottom for the plants that are going to live in here. And I am not going to bother washing them because the plants that I'm putting in here are either not going to have deep roots or they're very hardy species. So we're not going to worry about that. One pack of stones is not quite enough, as I expected, so I have a second pack of stones. I know it's kind of weird that you buy a bunch of stones at the store, but you know, laziness has its virtues. If I actually took the time to go out and collect a bunch of rocks, that would be my entire day. I'd have not enough time to do the other things that I need to do. Price of convenience, right? So we've got the base level down here, and what I had envisioned is that I am going to use two glass containers inside of the one glass container, creating a tiered structure with different plants inside of each. Now you can see from top to bottom inside of the lid to the top of that vial, there's not a lot of space. So what I had envisioned is a draping plant of some kind coming out of this top piece, probably a philodendron. Around the center is just going to be decorative filler, and the base, spearmint. The seeds should grow given a certain amount of time. The decorative accents are turmeric, I think. Tarragon, Mexican tarragon. So it's a plant that should do fairly well alongside of the others that are sun tolerant, and they would all do well with damp soil. So the lack of drainage, as well as having a closed environment, will keep the moisture in and make sure that those last a little bit longer. And to make this work, first, in the base of the inner middle glass container will be this black sand. So that'll be used in the base of this to provide some support for the other vase. I have some neutral colored sand that will blend better with the rocks in the larger container, and that will be used to keep the glass bowl from getting cracked or snapped in the process of finishing this terrarium. And again, normally I would be washing all of this material, but this is just more of a decorative thing. If the plants don't live in here, they cost maybe $5 to $10 to replace everything, and I suspect that some of them aren't going to last another year. They're annuals, and then this way, whoever ends up with this vivarium terrarium setup will have the benefit of choosing what to plant in there next. So little by little, these decorative filler accents are just going to have any contaminants that are in them absorbed by the plants that cycle through living in there. Now, looking at this in hindsight, I think what I'm going to do is actually take the rocks out of the middle. Just sand underneath this. And give it some good depth, increasing the space above the innermost vase from the lid. So we can see the inner bowl, not in its entirety. I think that's a nice effect. The rocks just rising up to the edge of the interior shape. Finish that out with a bit more sand around the edges of it, just to give it more of a completed aesthetic, and also for insulation for anything that might be planted in there eventually. Next, inside of the small round bowl, which is now fixed in the bottom, goes some of the black sand. I probably won't need to use the entire pack. That is to cushion the base of the other piece of glass that will be fit inside, so that they don't chip or break if there is a jostle or an impact of some kind. A little bit more. And the sand is also going to help when there's another pack of stones, of black stone, which you can see here, that I'll be adding to the inside of the middle container to give that some accent as well. So it's a dark contrast on the inside, a lighter stone outside. And what I think this is going to do is it's going to make the colors pop inside of this terrarium. If I plant anything with color in it, it's going to stand out against this black background much nicer than it would against, say, the brown on the base. So we've got some earthy tones around the outside, giving it that natural look, but then on the inside, it's getting a bit more artistic with the shade. But still a fairly natural color. You do see a lot of these dark gray charcoal colors in nature, typically in granite formations, of course, but or basalt, I suppose. This is not either of those. This is just some Dollar Tree decorative crafty stuff, and whatever it is that I happen to think of to do with it. So altogether, so far this project and all of the things in it, everything so far except for the outer container came from the Dollar Tree. That is 2 bags of stones that are brown, 1 bag of stones that's black, and 2 bags of sand, plus the 2 interior glass containers. $7. Not bad. And for some people, this might actually be just decorative enough, like they might just put something like this up in their house, and as it is, loose rocks. They could put a hardy succulent of some kind inside of these planters, which could have its penetrating roots going through the cracks and the crevices in the rocks, similar to an aquifer, and that would allow this more, I don't know what to call it, an alpine, rocky aesthetic, bare rocks, kind of a stark, rugged look. And it would go well with a bright green cactus where those rare flowers, the yellows and the pinks, would just really pop from that. We're going to be blanketing it with green, so it will have more of a riparian aesthetic, given the round stones, more like river stone, and the colors of green and types of plants that are going in there being tolerant of overwatering to some degree. There, see? It's good and solid in there. Still got a few stones left over, so I'll set those to the side along with the sand. And in the middle, that's where our philodendron is going to live. So I need to get a cutting of the philodendron. Here you can see the philodendron. It's a tropical plant that's very resistant to droughts and floods. And it's basically able to start growing roots from anywhere along its stem. Typically a segment of 3 stem divisions or more will easily take root in just plain bare water. And so that's all that I'm going to add to this container is just regular water, tap water. The philodendron species is very hardy, and so it will easily just accept that water without any fuss and start growing. It's great news for us. So this requires no soil, no substrate of any kind. It'll just be perfectly fine. Just like that. And I'm only filling it up to about where the level of the rocks is. One, because we don't want to have too much weight, but two, because we don't want to have that water being directly heated by the sunlight or whatever. That glass is going to cook it a little bit too much, I think, and that might not be good for the plant if this is in direct sunlight. So next we have the Mexican tarragon. And for this, I'm going to use the dirt from the planter to go around the outside edges here. And that's going to be the substrate that this is going to live in. Separate these roots a bit too. So all I'm doing is just supporting the weight at the top, sliding the planter off, and you can see there's some nice root structure on that. Typically I'd want to plant this into something a little deeper, but this is more decorative than functional. If the tarragon does not do super good in here, not a big deal. So all I'm doing is massaging it loose, causing the free soil to fall away from the root structures so I can separate each of these plants. There's 4 in total. There we are. It's starting to crumble. Crumbling, crumbling, crumbling. Very nice. Now these plants are probably going to go into shock. That means that they're either going to collapse and fall over. Basically they're not going to look super healthy probably for a couple of days. My plan is to keep this terrarium under certain observation for a while until I get it to its next owner, so that I can make sure that it doesn't just die after they get it and will last for a little while anyway, maybe a year. I suppose there's only 3 plants in here, and oh, that smells really good. Tarragon, getting that fresh root smell out of it, I think will go very nice with the spearmint inside of this as well. So if someone were to come and just pop the lid off of this, like after it's set out and established, they're going to come up, take this off, and just get a nice fresh noseful of tarragon and mint. I think that's going to go excellent together. If you disagree, then leave a comment and let me know. So the next part of this is I'm spreading around the soil around the base, just to give it some moist environment to grow in. Just to get established in these rocks. These roots are going to want to trace down into those rocks and seek out water, which is fine. The existing roots are going to have to whisk from the surface whatever moisture they need. In the meantime, try to get these separated about equal distance. covered. There we have it. Next, that's not quite standing yet. This one in the front here has some excellent root structure. I'm going to sprinkle these seeds in. I typically only want to go about a 1/4 inch depth. And these will grow up to a 2-foot height. So this is really going to flush out once these things start to grow. Hopefully it won't take over too much. But I suspect, given the limited space for the roots to establish, that these plants will probably be more of a lateral growth. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to distribute the seeds sparingly over the entire outer circle. Just let the random distribution decide how those are going to grow, or where. That's all of them. Spearmint and Tarragon. So the last piece of this, I've got some decorative moss, and that will be used to cover the soil, retain some moisture, and give it some color in the barren dirt areas. And that is what the spearmint will have to grow up and through, but it should be providing enough moisture for those seeds to establish, free root space for growth. And once it gets moist, I can start to compact it in there a little bit more. But this is going to give it more of a finished appeal. Totally artificial. This takes away the natural aesthetic and replaces it with what looks like stained colored moss. Something you might see in a little ornamental decoration somewhere rather than in a garden, right? I think it looks cool. So I'm using it. I'll use that to brace up the tarragon. We need a mound. Smells a little dusty. It is real moss. If you've never used decorative moss before, it's just moss that's been collected from somewhere and then dried out and maybe dipped into like a clothing dye or some sort of a natural dye to give it its vibrant green color here. That's an almost unnatural green. So I'd imagine that comes from a mineral pigment, not a botanical pigment. And if you've ever shopped at the Dollar Tree, you know that those labels do not describe very much about the materials that you're using. It just kind of tells you what it is, what it's intended for, and sometimes a measurement like a weight or a volume. So I really don't know where this is from. Likely in the north somewhere, Canada, Montana, who knows. Some place where they get a lot of moss, Washington, Oregon. Place with mountains and rain. And again, as this moss tamps down, you'll be able to start to see that inner cylinder just ever so slightly, a little bit more. And that's where that black color is really going to make that moss and everything else kind of pop. And what I'm doing now is I'm spraying down the moss, giving it some moisture in there, and I'll pack it down one more time. Just rinsing off everything, making it kind of tidy, nice looking, and keeping a bit of that dust down from the moss. It smells really fresh already. Oh, I wish you could smell this. It smells really good. It smells very good. I think for the last accent, because I do have a bit of those black stones left over, I'm going to use those to keep down some of the sponginess of the moss and just giving it a bit more of a finished look here. A little bit of depth and scale with the inner containers. I think just for fun, I'm going to add a personal detail to the inside here. Something to give it a unique signature. One of my favorite decorative accents is a forest snail shell. Put that right in this open space here. And all together, you can see that we've got the philodendron, which is a little bit dusty. We've got 3 plants of Mexican tarragon, very shallow substrates, so the dirt layer, the organic layer, is maybe 2 inches deep. So that would be enough for the roots to establish and grow in, but not to be too pronounced. They're going to have some roots seeking down into the stones down in the bottom, which comprise another 2-inch layer, all topped with a bit of moss, a couple of decorative plant accents in the middle, and the really cool part is that inside of that center jar, if we ever wanted to plant more things in there, small seeds, for example, could establish quite easily in that. In fact, I'm very tempted to just use some philodendrons to poke into the middle container and then use this upper container for something else entirely. For example, this is a peperomia rosso, very cool looking plant. This one's going into my vivarium, but I could see a plant like that being the centerpiece with the philodendrons and the tarragon around it just as easily. So always have a backup plan for your ideas, just in case your original plan doesn't quite work